Hello and welcome to our webinar today, and thank you for taking the time out to attend. In this session, we're going to cover a couple of recent announcements from Microsoft relating to their Sentinel SIEM platform, which brings new features to simplify and elevate the capabilities for SOC analysts, whilst also providing opportunities to optimize your costs. Specifically, we'll be providing an overview of the integration of Sentinel into Microsoft Defender XDR, and we'll also be covering Sentinel Data Lake, their new low-cost security storage solution. To introduce myself, for those that don't know me, I'm Matt Ross, CTO at ITC Secure, and I've been working with Sentinel for over 5 years now. Joining me today as co-hosts, I have Edwin and Karim. Edwin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Edwin Carandine here. So I'm a product manager at ITC Secure and focus on the managed services.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karim Fayyad. I'm a solution engineer covering what we call SCI in Microsoft, short for Security, Compliance, and Identity. Again, mainly helping customers discover and understand really the unique value proposition of the security products and services, focusing today primarily on Defender XDR and Microsoft Sentinel as our SIEM source solution.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Karim. This is the running order for the webinar. We'll have some time at the end to address any questions that you may have, so please feel free to put them in the Q&A tab as they come to you. And then we'll be ending the session with a couple of options to support you with getting started with this transition, should you wish. Okay, so jumping straight into it, the Unified Security Operations Portal. Karim's going to take you through this.
Perfect. All right, so I think story here on this slide really is, we want to talk more about the evolution of Microsoft Sentinel and how we are planning and helping customers transition from using Sentinel, if you're using Sentinel with your existing workspaces, to having that unified platform approach, which we'll cover in this conversation. But just can give you a story. We went through multiple phases, so the evolution of the product went through multiple phases. We started off in roughly about 2019 by launching our cloud-native SIEM solution in Sentinel on Azure. We offered scalable logs ingestion. We offered some analytics. We offered some threat hunting capabilities, leveraging a query language called KQL. So lots of enhancements there. And we also introduced some of the automation capabilities in what we refer to as SOAR capabilities or orchestration, automation response. We have supported with the experience by building or supporting customers to build logic apps and Azure functions to be able to create that automation for threat management. And then we went into a phase 2 kind of evolution. We went with the expansion and leveraging AI into the systems. So we matured heavily in leveraging some of our analytics capabilities. We offered advanced analytics. We offered some machine learning based anomaly detection capabilities. And we started integrating with, back then was called Microsoft 365 Defender, which is now what we refer to as the Defender XDR capabilities, to be able to give you what we call cross-domain visibility across your entire estate. Shortly thereafter, we announced Security Copilot. So that was, when Security Copilot went into preview in 2023, and it allowed, SOC analysts and, SOC personnel who are using Defender XDR to be able to get, what we refer to as the embedded experience. As you're, navigating through the Security Admin Center, on the right-hand side, you'll see Security Copilot popping up, and you can see, incident summarizations. You can see some recommendations of what to do and what to look for, just to kind of accelerate and expedite, that mean time to respond to an incident. And then the following phase was in 2024. We announced, in preview, we announced the unified experience or the unified portal experience, where we concatenated and combined Defender XDR incidents and Sentinel incidents into a single queue, giving visibility into all of the the different workloads that you have protected. So if you're using the Defender and the Defender XDR, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, correlating all of these signals together from your endpoints, from your applications, from your Office 365 services, and from Sentinel into a single incident, right? So again, massive change here in terms of making the life of SOC analysts much easier, not to navigate a couple of portals, whether on the portal.azure, or the Azure-based UI and the Security Admin Center at the same time. And then in July 2025, we have announced the mandatory migration. So as you can see at the bottom of the slide, by 1st of July 2026, we are deprecating the Azure-based Sentinel UI, and we're going to have one single pane of glass to be able to manage your entire security operations from within the Security Admin Center. So again, moving completely from two different portals where you can manage all of your services into a single pane of glass or unified platform approach. So very quickly on the left-hand side, as you can see, log ingestion, we can definitely support with cost predictability and management. There's a lot we can do there in terms of estimating your costs. We have trials, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for 31 days for 10 gigs, if I'm not mistaken, of data that you can trial out Sentinel for if you're new on this journey. A different tiering of ingestion cost as well. If you know your estimates, there's pay-as-you-go model, there's a commitment tier model based on the amount of data that you produce. So we can support there. Also, we'll talk more about the retaining and the retention that you can have with Sentinel and how long do you need to retain those logs and information for. Again, we introduced some services there in Sentinel Data Lake to help with retaining low fidelity sort of logs or alerts in Sentinel for a much cheaper cost, as opposed to the hot storage in analytical tiering storage. We support third-party tooling, as you can see from the slide, so we can take data from multiple data sources. We have roughly about 350 plus connectors that we can integrate with to Microsoft services like Defender, like Entra ID or Azure Active Directory. If you're still using on-premises directory services, ADFS, ADDS, we can integrate with those, install sensors and connectors, and be able to extract and take and ingest all of these logs. And if you're even using third-party services, appliances, Cisco Umbrella, for instance, I've seen customers use that. We can still take logs from network devices and appliances to be able to further investigate and manage incidents from there. SOAR capabilities, lots of conversations that we can have there. So we can automate incident response playbooks. We can customize playbooks using what we call logic apps or Azure functions. Exactly, that extensibility side of things, in terms of what flow you want to take by, blocking a user account, for instance, or isolating the device from the network, or even, sending notifications to security admins and SOC analysts, etc., etc. So a lot of different capabilities that we can do there in terms of shaping that flow or that automation flow as we progress. And the last couple of points around SOC challenges with dual portals. Now we don't need to manage two different incident IDs. Now we're combining everything under one incident ID with the different signals and different defenders that comes into the picture. You don't have to switch between two different portals. Now everything sits within the Security Admin Center or the M365 Admin Center. And again, the capabilities that we used to have in the different portals, now everything is combined and concatenated under one portal. So very much easier and convenient experience for SOC analysts or the security personnel who is managing the SOC for yourselves. If we can, yes. So again, with the slide, we want to. Back in the day, we used to take data from the defenders, have it in Defender. We used to have separate, connectors in Sentinel to onboard the Defender XDR telemetry and data in Sentinel, and third-party connectors as well. Now, that's not the case anymore, right? So we can have everything being part of the Defender portal for SecOps analysis and response. We take the data, we correlate the data from the Defender XDR capabilities. If you have endpoints protected with MDE, Defender for Endpoint, if you have your Office 365 and Exchange and you have Defender for Office 365 as your secure email gateway, we can natively integrate with Sentinel and have that unified view in the unified Defender portal. Again, we'd be more than happy later down the line to kind of show you what that looks like and the end user, the admin experience and how to navigate the portal. If I maybe can go to the next slide, if that's okay, just to kind of talk more about the benefits and to kind of summarize really the benefits of unifying the experience with Sentinel and Defender XDR. So as I've mentioned, a single incident queue, again, combining those signals, so a single pane of glass, combining the SIM capabilities in Sentinel and XDR telemetry data, and be able to give you the much easier experience for your SOC analyst to be able to triage incidents or maybe use some of those advanced hunting experiences and hunt threats very easily, and also to manage cases across multiple workloads, and again we'll talk about it in the next bit, in multiple tenants and multiple portals as well, and we'll talk more about that. Near real-time correlation of security events across data sources. So again, we can, as I mentioned, we integrate especially with the Defender XDR products, the Defenders for Endpoints, Office 365 Cloud Apps, and identity. We ingest alerts and telemetry from the Defenders almost instantly, much easier now. We can use advanced correlation rules and incident correlation engines to be able to link alerts together from different domains and be able to present that in what we call an incident. So an incident is basically a combination of relevant alerts. So every suspicious activity that we spot, we generate an alert against, and then we combine all relevant alerts together to give you an incident or a story, just to give you an idea of what happened. Now, the idea here is to kind of give you different alerts from different engines, depending on what we see. So if it's an alert generated from endpoints, an alert generated from your PSTs or emails, we'll be able to combine all of those into one single incident. Unified entity pages. Again, as I've mentioned, we can connect with multiple data sources. We can give you a lens into all of these different areas, devices, users, IP addresses, and resources in the Defender portal. We do manage and support with multi-tenant experience. So again, we have a lot of flavors of that. We can manage that with our management capabilities in the Defender portal. We can connect one primary workspace and multiple secondary workspaces per tenant, and then you can leverage some of those cross-tenant KQL queries to proactively threat hunting, right? So you can use KQL across multiple tenants to be able to hunt for threats. Similarly, we have another flavor of it, which is basically Azure Lighthouse for your partners or your MSSPs. So MSSPs can manage your Sentinel experience or your Sentinel tenants from their own Azure tenant, and makes it much easier to, from a centralized visibility and governance, to be able to give that power for MSSPs to be able to manage your SOC from their side. And again, the last couple of things in terms of greater insights, we have a lot of tools, SOC optimization insights. We can give you a lens and a dashboard into, how to optimize your SOC. Simply, if you're ingesting logs and you don't have any detection rules against those logs, we can surface this kind of information, the connectors that you have onboarded, the logs that you have ingested, but you're not really have created any detection rules or analytics rules against those logs. And then we can recommend certain connectors and certain rules to be added from within the Content Hub experience in Sentinel. And again, Security Copilot integration, as I mentioned, we've added that throughout the experience to make the life of a SOC analyst much easier. For instance, if the SOC analyst needs to generate a KQL, he or she can simply just write pure English of what KQL he needs to generate, and then Security Copilot can assist with generating the KQL. So you don't have to be proficient in KQL. Security Copilot can help with that experience. And last but not least, before I hand it back to Matt, is the Sentinel Data Lake experience. So we've announced, I believe, in July 22nd, and then it got GA this year in September 30th, Sentinel Data Lake, and that's our new tiering of storage for low fidelity logs. So you can simply just ingest and retain low fidelity logs like proxy logs or DNS logs or network logs in general into Sentinel Data Lake for much cheaper cost for a longer period of time. And we'll talk more about that in the next couple of slides. And I'll pass it over to Matt just to kind of talk us through the considerations that we need and the requirements we need to make sure that we have a successful migration to the unified portal with Defender XDR and Sentinel. Back to you, Matt.
Thank you, Karim. Okay, so what do you need to consider when transitioning Sentinel to the Defender XDR portal? So with the role-based access control, the unified RBAC, which you can configure in the XDR portal, doesn't cover Azure roles at present. So they will need to be configured within Azure so that the SOC analysts have access to manage Sentinel and the log analytics workspace from the XDR portal. So those roles need to be assigned and configured in Azure itself. Also, if you're an MSSP or if you're managing multiple workspaces and tenants within your organization, then a combination of Entra B2B and Azure Lighthouse will be required to access both the incident queues and also to perform any threat hunting or run any detections. And that can be managed through the multi-tenant organization feature, which is a sort of parent-child feature within Microsoft XDR. Currently, GDAP isn't supported for Azure roles, but I know Microsoft are working on a solution for that at the moment, but no firm dates are being supplied there. So coming on to detection, so XDR and Sentinel have different detection mechanisms, custom detections in XDR and analytic rules in Sentinel. Both are available in the unified portal. However, if you want to build a detection using both XDR and Sentinel tables, then only custom detections are supported. Unless, of course, you ingest those XDR tables into a log analytics workspace. But to do that, there will be an ingestion charge. Note also that there are some tables duplicated between XDR and Sentinel, and there are some mismatches in the schema. A good example of this would be the identity info table, which is created if you're running UEBA in Sentinel. There is an identity info table in XDR, and they provide similar data, but the schemas are slightly different. So just be mindful of those slight nuances if you're building detections. Custom detection rules also allow for native XDR remediation actions, and also there's no limit on the number of NRT rules you can have with custom detection. So if you're comfortable with running your detections over 30 days of data, then it would make sense to start migrating your detection rules to custom detection and away from analytic rules in good time. Incident and alert correlation. So there is a new correlation engine in XDR. The Sentinel Fusion engine, which is used in Sentinel, is no longer used. The new XDR correlation engine is a lot more active, a lot more present, and it's there primarily to reduce that alert and incident fatigue and it does that through merging the source incidents into a target incident. So a source incident, if it matches on the similar or matching entities and other criteria, it will then move that source incident into a target incident. That incident name may be changed when correlation is applied. So again, be mindful that if you've got any automation rules or any logic apps or other automation that's relying on the incident title, you might want to look at using the incident the analytic rule name or the custom detection rule name instead. Something also to consider is any tagging applied to a source incident is removed when it's merged into the target incident through the correlation process, and that all those tags are replaced with a redirected tag. So if you're making any decisions based on tagging, or if you're looking to tidy up the environment afterwards, be mindful that those tags will be removed as part of the correlation process. Sticking with the correlation engine, it's only the primary Sentinel workspace that's used for correlation with XDR events. So if you've got multiple workspaces, Sentinel workspaces, it's only the primary one that's used for correlation at this time. And then finally, if you're using automation rules, the incident provider condition property is removed. So before you might have seen incident provider of Azure Sentinel or Microsoft XDR. Well, as soon as you integrate Sentinel to XDR, you only have the single incident provider, which is the Microsoft XDR. And finally, once you've done that migration, you want to enable Sentinel Data Lake as soon as possible to start the mirroring of data between tables in the analytic tier and the data lake tier. And we'll go into the details of why that's important next in our webinar. And I think that is next up. So over to you, Edwin, to talk about Sentinel Data Lake.
Thanks, Matt. I'd like to start by talking about Sentinel Data Lake in this section by going through some of the historical challenges with long-term log data retention. Before Sentinel Data Lake, companies have had to compromise on their requirements to retain log data for various reasons, be it for further operational insights, the ability to do digital forensics, to perform threat hunting, data analysis over a longer time span, and for compliance reasons. The compromises were necessary because of the costs associated with long-term data retention. Dealing with high data volumes in general, the complexity of retaining data with existing available solutions, such as auxiliary tier storage and archiving, and in some cases, moving to other lower cost storage options just to retain the data. None of which were ideal, as it provided operational overhead and complexity when the long-term data was needed for operational and compliance requirements. Furthermore, the ability to engage and make use of the data for proactive and predictive analysis was off-putting in making the data easily and readily available for such activities. Now, I'd like to hand over to Matt, who will take you through how Sentinel Data Lake works at a high level. Matt.
Thanks, Edwin. So I just want to sort of talk through the architecture and how everything ties together within the XDR ecosystem. So Data Lake is one of two tiers of data storage now available within Sentinel. So you've got your analytics tier, which is your hot storage, coupled to compute and used to run analytics, which can be used to trigger alerts and incidents. And then you have your Sentinel Data Lake tier, which is effectively cold storage, on which there is no analytics applied, but the data can be used for threat hunting and investigations. And for those familiar with auxiliary and archive tier, you will now see those build as Sentinel Data Lake once you've enabled Data Lake in your environment. So I'll talk through this diagram. It's something I pulled from the Microsoft documentation, and I'll work from left to right. So when the Sentinel Data Lake is enabled, the data is then, as soon as you enable it, the data is mirrored from the tables in the analytic tier to the same table in the Data Lake tier. So this mirroring of data is completed at no extra cost. So you get that as a freebie, so to speak. So once you've got that data mirrored and you want to extend the retention of your data within Sentinel, you get the 90 days free retention in the analytic tier, but if you want to go beyond that, the optimum solution would be to extend the retention in the data lake tier, no, as it's already mirrored. So what would happen is, say if you extended the total retention to 180 days, what you'll see is the data is mirrored from day 0, and then after 90 days, it will be purged from the analytic tier, but it will still be retained in the data lake tier within the table. When you enable Sentinel Data Lake, there are some additional tables that are created, some system tables, which are solely for use within the data lake tier and contain user and asset information from the domain, which can be used and useful for enriching queries whilst you're running those queries in the data lake. And just to be clear around accessing between analytic tier and data lake tier tables, so that if you're running KQL queries on the analytic tier, you'll do that in the hunting section within the XDR portal. And if you're performing queries on the data lake tier, you'll be doing that in the data lake exploration section within the XDR portal. So moving into the middle, into the data lake tier, there's the possibility to ingest data straight into tables into the data lake tier. So by moving a table that you know has a lot of its high volume, low security value data, such as common security log or syslog or AAD, non-interactive signing logs as good examples, you can move those tables into the data lake tier, do not include and don't include them in the analytics tier at all, and therefore you get much reduced ingestion costs. In fact, a factor of, I think, about 26 times cheaper if you're not performing any transformations on the data. Now, it's important to note that if you're going to move any table into the data lake tier from the analytic tier, all the data needs to be mirrored to avoid data loss, and Edwin will cover that in the next slide, or the next but one slide, just to show you how this forward fill mechanism works and how you can avoid losing data during the migration. There is an additional option to transform your data at the workspace level or via AMA, so you can transform the data before ingestion to split data between the analytic tier and the data lake tier. There may be some reasons for doing that to keep some highly valuable data within a table at the analytics tier and then move all the other data into the data lake tier within the table. Now that it does add a lot of complexity because you'll have to have a custom table in one of the tiers, and you might also want to consider duplicating the data just to keep the table integrity, maintain that table integrity in the data lake tier for future queries. And then if we move on to the next section, there's an ability to promote data from the data lake tier into the analytic tier. And you might want to do this because there you can summarize data, or you can perform KQL queries in the data lake tier that, if they return some data, that can be used to trigger detections in your analytic tier. So a good example of that would be running a query to match your threat intel data, your IOCs, against firewall destination logs, so whether that be IPs or URLs. So you're doing the match. If there's any matches, you then populate a table in the analytic tier, which can trigger some detections. and create a ticket, and the SOC analyst can start investigating. To do this, you build the KQL queries in the data lake tier and then turn those into jobs. And KQL jobs can be scheduled to run at various frequencies from a minute, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. And then as part of that job, we'll surface the data into a custom table to be used by analytics. And then finally, on the far right, you've got the Defender XDR table. So that this table is totally separate from the data lake and the analytics and tiers. If you want to bring that XDR, the XDR tables and event data into data lake and analytics, again, there's an ingestion charge to do that. But it's fairly simple to configure within the portal. So I know there's a lot of information to absorb there, but Edwin's going to provide a recap now for you guys.
Thanks, Matt.
No, actually, no, you're going to cover the retention. Okay.
Yeah, so this slide really is to illustrate what would happen if you prematurely reduce your retention period in the analytics tier, having turned on the data lake tier. So just walking you through this, day 0, if you'll have 180 days of data in the analytics tier, and you turn on the data lake tier on. Day 90, you have 180 days in the analytics tier and 90 days in the data lake tier. Then you decide at day 120 to reduce the analytics tier retention period to the default 90 days, and you have 120 days of data in the data lake tier. By day 150, you have 90 days in the analytics tier and 150 days in the data lake tier. At this point, you have lost 30 days of data from your 180 days data retention requirements. So in summary, take note before rushing to turn your analytic tier retention period to the 90 days default when you have a longer retention period requirement. In this example, turning the analytics tier retention period from 180 to 120 days would be the right action to take to ensure the coverage of the retention period with the overlaps in the 2 tiers. So again, just at the bottom, just to emphasize that right now, forward fill is supported by Sentinel Data Lake. There will at some point in the future be the ability to do a backfill, but right now it's forward fill only. The next slide, please, Matt. So I think Matt and Karim have touched on a lot of these things, but I just wanted to present this slide to summarize the differences. So some of you are familiar with the cost, obviously, being much less with Sentinel Data Lake, and the fact that you can store data for much longer than you can at the analytic tier. The other comparison points are really self-explanatory. However, what I would like to highlight, and I think it's been touched on in the previous slides, but it's worth emphasizing, is that the Sentinel Data Lake does bring the ability to enrich alerts, perform threat hunting on a longer time span, and also perform digital forensics analysis for a longer time span period. What this means is that you can now, better armed with available data to mine, make much better informed decisions, and importantly, make it possible to identify dormant threats in your environment that was previously difficult to find due to either the not enough data stored, or the complexity of running queries to extract the data for where it was stored. I'm going to hand you back to Matt, who will talk about some of the implementation considerations. Matt.
Thanks, Edwin. Okay. So, implementation considerations when enabling data lake. So as Edwin has touched upon, data mirroring and that forward fill issue. So again, you want to get the data lake enabled as soon as possible to begin that forward fill. To manage tables in the data lake, additional unified RBAC permissions are required. There's a data operations parameter which must be checked, and this will allow you to allow the creation of tables and also modifying table retention in the data lake. Note also, if your Microsoft 365 data isn't in the same region as the data lake, by onboarding to the data lake, you're consenting to ingest your Microsoft 365 data into the region where your data lake resides, or your data lake will reside where your log analytics workspace resides. Okay, next up is reviewing your business and regulatory requirements in regards to data retention. Typically, most people have stuck to 90 days in the analytics tier, and some have leveraged the archive tier in the past, or have used third-party tools for longer retention. But now you have this similar easy option of using the data lake to extend your retention period. So maybe now is the time to revisit that, given that the budget constraints have sort of been lifted to some regard. Then next is to identify the largest data tables and assess if that data is suitable to be moved directly into the data lake tier, or solely into the data lake tier. As I mentioned before, those tables which have a large volume but low security value, especially around detections, and where the data is more suitable for investigation purposes only, they would be good candidates to move to the data lake. If it's a low volume table, then there's no real value in moving it solely into the data lake. The data is mirrored for free anyway, so you don't really, you're not making any large cost optimization by moving small tables. And also, if any tables have NRT or near real-time alerting associated with the data, then they won't be allowed to be moved solely into the data lake tier. So if you've identified what tables could move into solely into the data lake tier to optimize your costs, then also investigate is there any data within those tables that actually, if we can query that data and then promote that up to the analytic tier to trigger detections and for the analysts to start investigating certain anomalous behavior or activity, then that should be done at that point before you move the data into the table into the data lake tier. Then build those KQL queries, and you can build the queries prior to moving the table solely into the data lake, because you've got the data mirrored. So build those KQL queries and evaluate what data is being returned, and format that into the right schema, so you can then elevate that into a custom table within the analytics tier for the detections. And if you are elevating or promoting that data into the custom tables, then you might need to either create new analytic rules or custom detection rules, or modify existing ones to leverage those new custom tables to trigger the analytics. And if you have got, if it still is using the original table in the analytics tier, and you're creating or adding a new custom table as well, and you want to fold that into the same analytics or custom detection rule, then use the workspace parser to combine multiple tables within an analytical custom detection rule. Okay, I think next Edwin's going to cover a case study to show.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
Okay.
So I think this is the final slide of the webinar. So it's really to give you a bit of an illustration of what kind of cost savings that you could make. So in this example, customer ingests 100 gigabyte of data every month and has a 90 day retention period. So just really being conservative about it. And that 50% of the logs being ingested have been identified as common security logs that could be ingested directly into Sentinel Data Lake. With this example, a 90-day retention period, you can achieve something like 25% in monthly costs, but it's only if you ingest and retain the common security log in the data lake. So this is using the Sentinel calculator to generate this example. And then as a footnote, this doesn't include any query or advanced data insights that you may want to run on the data in the data lake tier. So really to benefit from Sentinel Data Lake, you have to look at different types of logs. And as mentioned before by Matt, things like the common security log is a good example where you can nominate, if you will, directly for that type of log data to go straight into Sentinel Data Lake. And with that, you achieve your savings both at sort of the ingestion level and then at the storage level. So just wanted to leave you an example before I think we end the webinar and hand it back to you, Matt.
Thanks, Edwin. Okay, we have a little bit of time set aside for a Q&A. I have been going through some of the questions submitted during the webinar. I don't know if there's any unanswered questions. Right.
I think what I see is 3 questions, and I think we addressed most of them, but again, if you want to shed more light on some of those, if you want to bring them up, but I think we addressed the majority of the questions that were posted in the Q&A section.
Yeah, so regarding custom detection rules, there was a couple of questions there. So those are the detections that are created in XDR. Typically, previously they were applied solely to the tables in XDR, so device events and identity events, etc., related to the Defender products. But now, obviously, the log analytics workspace tables are now presented in XDR, so you're able to use the custom detection rules to query both the XDR tables and the log analytics workspace tables, which allows you to create much more advanced detections, leveraging both tables, especially the endpoint and identity tables contain a lot more useful information than some of the tables that you'd get in your traditional SIEM. I have put a link in there to a blog post regarding custom detections in the unified experience, and within that link there is another link which shows the parity between custom detections and analytic rules. So you'll be able to use that table to determine exactly what type of rule would be best for your detections.
Yeah. And I think there was a question earlier as well, Matt, that I kind of replied to and commented on when it comes to the licensing aspect of Sentinel. We understand that, Sentinel, I guess since it's a consumption-based service, it's hard to predict at the early stages, cost-wise and cost predictability. We changed that massively with some of the services that we offer. So SOC optimization is definitely a good service and feature to have to kind of give you an idea of the amount of data that you don't need to, or the connectors that you can offboard simply or anything like that from a data standpoint. Also, we talked throughout this webinar around the different storage options that we've introduced to the table in terms of ingestion costs, retention capabilities, and stuff like that. And also, I highlighted in the beginning of this session around the different pricing models that we have, whether it's a pay-as-you-go model or the commitment tiers that we have based on the amount of data that you produce on a daily basis. We can recommend the right tiering for you to make sure that you are licensed in the best possible way for Sentinel. Again, there's a lot of
just on that tiering. Sorry, Karim. There is a new 50 gig commitment tier that's just been released. So that might be of interest. So if you thought you'd never ever reach the 100 gig per day tier, there is now a 50 gig per day tier that is available.
Yeah, almost forgot that one. But no, this is definitely a great point to add. And again, as you probably know, there's a lot that goes into the equation in terms of the amount of time that you'll need to retain data for, and again, type of storage as well. So this is a lot in the mix. I think you touched on it as well, Matt, in terms of the usability of SOAR capabilities, right? So the automation side of things as well. If you're using logic apps, then again, this comes into the equation in terms of the pricing side of things with Sentinel. So I shared an article there that can give you maybe a starting point of what to expect, and then we can definitely work with you on understanding more, your use case and promoting and suggesting the right tiering, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you, Karim. There is another question. Can custom detection rules be used for third-party rules? Or I presume that's third-party connections. So at the moment you can. The Content Hub and the rules that come with the Content Hub are typically being for Sentinel, obviously, because Sentinel is designed as for third-party connections. But there's no reason why you couldn't transpose that data or take that analytic rule and bring it into your custom detections and deploy it there as a custom detection rule. And I would imagine that over time, more and more of those custom, the Content Hub solutions will include more and more custom detection rules as the solution matures. So I can see that being the direction of travel for sure. Okay.
Perfect.
I don't think there's any other questions. So just to wrap up or getting started, sort of slightly different to wrapping up, but I think obviously we've shared a lot of information today, and if anyone would like some help getting started with understanding the status of their environment, we're offering either a one-to-one session with our Microsoft Security MVP or a free 2-hour assessment. Those who are interested, can you let us know via the poll that has popped up? And thank you for your submissions, and we'll follow up directly with you following the webinar. And thank you everybody for attending. We hope that you found the webinar useful, and I'll look to close it there. Thank you everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.